Greetings everyone, welcome to this new video. We're gonna talk about Animated Guardian, because Animated Guardian has been very popular in 3.8, and the reason for that is because, well, everyone is playing Summoner and a lot of minions, and Animated Guardian is perfect here because it can both buff you as a player with a bunch of defensive, offensive buffs, but most of all, they can also buff your minions, which is something that is not to scoff at, because there's not a lot of mods that actually buff your minions. So it's a skill gem. We have it up here. You can take it out here, and the higher the level on this, the higher the life of the minion, and you can buff this life with the gear, which we're gonna talk about later, and also the movement speed and so on. So you want it as high level as possible, because there's one negative thing, which we'll also talk about later a little bit more, is that if this Animated Guardian die in a map or somewhere else, then you lose all the gear you have put on it, and some of this gear that I'm gonna show you is multiple exalted. So it's very important to have as high life as possible. So we're gonna just put it down here to show you. Right now, if I click the Animated Guardian thing, nothing is gonna happen. See, nothing. Because if you drop an item here, and then I hold over it and I click the Animated Guardian, you can see my skill bar is filled with it, and voila, it picks up the item, and now I have an Animated Guardian. It's not big here because it's just a floating head, because I picked up a headpiece, helmet, and then you can just put on all the rest. You can have one helmet, one pair of gloves, one pair of boots, one chest armor, and one either shield and weapon, or a dual wield. So we're gonna show different combinations here depending on your budget. The next item you put down, if it's another head, it's just gonna replace the one you have on top. So if you change your mind, you're not gonna get that item back, but you can just change it whenever. So just throw it down on the ground and then pick it up by clicking the button. So without further ado, we're gonna go into the 3 different options here. For our budget version, we are gonna pick up a few items, and the ones that I have picked here is from a specific guide that I'm gonna link in the description, and I'm gonna go with some variations from that also. So just hear me out and let's see what is best for you. We're gonna start with our rainbow strides here. The reason we're picking these is because it's a lot of elemental resistance, and we kind of want to be capped on elemental resistance and have a lot of life, of course, and life regen and all those good stuff, because we do not want to lose all the items when the Animated Guardian actually dies. So that is pretty good. Movement speed is not super important. It has some block chance and stuff like that. I know there is other items like windscreen, which give an additional curse, which we'll talk about in the last section. Yeah, and we have this victorious flight, which is a 10% increased movement speed for you and your nearby allies. That is pretty neat to have, but honestly I put on these in the beginning of the league. For our hands, it's soft bond. It's actually the only one that's going to be both in the budget and the expensive version. The reason for that is that 16% increased maximum life, because Animated Guardian has such a huge health pool. 16% increased max life is going to be huge for that. And the other things, we have cold resistance, which is very good. We can cap our cold resistance very easily. So that is why we're choosing these. For our chest piece, we're gonna have a Mubus charge, and we have a lot of life here. 15% all elemental resistance. Gain endurance charge when you take a critical hit. And then we also share endurance charge with nearby party members. So if we get critical hit by an enemy, then it's gonna share those endurance charges also to us and all the nearby allies, which is, well, everyone there. I think it might be only to us actually, party members is there. So I am not 100% sure that actually works for us. Regenerate 2% of life per second if you have been hit recently. So this is the one why we're picking this. Not, well, because it has high life and percentage elemental resistance also. But because we have such a high life pool, we want a lot of life regen, because 2% is huge. It might not sound much, but when you have like 60,000 health, that is a lot. For our helmet, we're gonna use Lear's Cost, and it's because of the loss mod there. You and nearby allies gain 15% increased damage. That is all your minions increased damage, so that is very strong right there for just a passive buff by everyone. For our staff here, or for our weapon, we are gonna use nearby or dying breath iron staff. Nearby enemies have 18% increased effect of curses on them, which means that I have 2 curses right now on them. That means it's 18% increased effect, which is a lot when it comes to these curses. So if you buff up your curses already, that is going to be even more strong. And that is like enfeeble and just all those elemental weakness, more damage, more survivability, and everything like that. Nearby allies gain increased damage, like the same as Lear's Cost, so that is very good. And then other stats here that are very neat for us also, and some survivability with block and so forth. So those are the items that I recommend. Otherwise, you can also go with this one, and you can pause the video and just check it out there. And then I have some special items here which have additional curse, which we'll talk about in the last section, but we get to that later. Let's go to the next. For our more endgame, more expensive amount of gear here for our Animated Guardian, we are gonna use specific ones. These two by itself are about 3 exalted, so it's nothing cheap here. You are gonna spend a little bit, but that means they are basically immortal. You're never gonna lose them. You don't need to resummon it or anything like that. So the items that you put on it is gonna be there for the rest of the league. Yeah. So we're gonna start with the bread and butter here. This one is so good. It's 1.5 exalted now, I think. It's Kingmaker. Nearby allies have 30% increase in item rarity. So if you farm maps, that is very neat. It's not why we have this one, but it's a good passive buff. Nearby allies have Calling Strike. That means 10%, they're just gonna die instantly. Very good on bosses, anything basically. Calling Strike for free is super good. And nearby allies have 50% to critical strike multiplier. Huge buff for you and your minions. And nearby allies have Fortify. That is probably the best. We all know how strong Fortify. So everyone who played 3.7 last patch know how strong this one is. If you played Cyclone and stuff like that, it's huge survivability buff. And this is all on one item. This is passive. You just use this Animated Guardian, you gain all of these stats from one item. Super good. For our chest piece, which is also like 1.2 exalted or something like that, we have a lot of life on it, some resistance, but we have most of all regenerate 5% of life per second. That's 5% of our life regen. Yeah, that means even if we get hit by Shaper Slam or Uber Elder or something like that, it does not matter, because our life is gonna be up in a millisecond anyway. The other ones doesn't really matter. It just means that it's not gonna hit any of the enemies, but we don't care about that. It's not a damage maker, it's a buffer. We are buffing, it's like an extra aura, our Animated Guardian. Same thing for Southbound, we're just gonna use this one again, so we're not gonna talk about it. For our helmet slot, nearby enemies have -9% to lightning resistance, or whatever resistance you are using. So we can have cold, fire, chaos, whatever you're using. You can have nearby enemies debuffed by your guardian. And you also minions deal increased damage on top of this here. And you have life and some resistance on this. You can also have regenerate a percentage of your life if you use I think a metallic fossil. So this one you have to fossil craft or actually buy with the lightning fossils also, which I don't know the name of. For our feet, we are gonna use no pair of boots. We are looking for the regenerate 1% of life and all the resistance you need, percent life if you can, and some extra maximum life. All this is good, and just complement with some resistance if you can. So those are the more expensive items. let's not go there. Then you can of course change them with whatever you feel like, but those are the items I highly recommend we go with for the more expensive version. And now let's go to the advanced. For our advanced section, we are going to talk about curses and how we can make our Animated Guardian apply certain curses and even exceed our own curse limit this way. So this is what I've tested, and there is a lot of the advanced stuff here. I had to really test it out, go in slow motion on my videos and just see what actually happened with all of these. So what you can do is you can apply additional curses. So let's see here. Right now I have my normal curse limit, which is 1 for players and Animated Guardian, by the way. And if I have this chest right here, you can apply an additional curse. That means I can have 2 curses. That means right now I can apply curse on hit here with elemental weakness, and I have enfeebled when I use my winter orb. So that means I'm gonna curse everyone that my winter orb is touching with 2 curses. Now, if my Animated Guardian, how can I make that also apply a curse? Well, it's very simple. You can either corrupt your gloves, because on gloves you can have a hit effect with a vulnerability, you can have elemental weakness, enfeeble, I don't know, temporal chain, all those good curses, but it will not apply it, or it will overwrite one of your curses, because your Animated Guardian works the same way as another player would do in a party. So they have a certain curse limit when it comes to party play. So if you play with 5 people, it would be very stupid if everyone could just apply a curse on an enemy and it would not affect the curse limit, because that means that every enemy would have 5 different curses on them, and yeah, that would mean party play would be completely overpowered and it would just be face roll every time. So what it does instead, what GG decided to do, is that the one with the highest curse limit is going to decide how many curses the target can have. So basically how it works is, if I have 2 curses, you can apply 2 curses. That means that I can apply 1 curse, and then the next one who hits the mob who has another curse, not the same as mine, apply the second one, and then the next one just replaces one of the previous curses. So you can have the maximum of 2. So we can utilize this for our Guardian here. What it means is that if we can equip items that give us an additional curse, like all of these items, what I recommend is that you corrupt one of these Vixen Entropent. That means you have a curse on these and you can apply additional curse. So if your curse limit is only 1 on your current character, and you do this, that means whatever curse these gloves have is gonna also be applied to the target when your Animated Guardian go up and hit that target. That is very neat. But I have 2 curses already. That means I need 2 items that gives me curses. So I use Wind Scream also on top of this. That means I have both my corrupted Vixen Entropy with Temporal Chain, for example, and that gives me 1 extra. That means my Animated Guardian can have 2 curses now, and I equip my Wind Scream. That means I can have 3 curses on the target. So now when my Animated Guardian hit an enemy that already has 2 curses from myself, it also applies on top of that its own curse. That means the target has 3 curses. So that is a very neat trick, and I did a lot of testing on it, and it's quite overpowered if you can apply 3 curses. And you can also buff the curses, increase effect of curses on you from your shield or some other items on top of this, and some from the skill tree. So you can make a really good build just by debuffing or amplifying your damage on all the maps or all the bosses you're doing. So that was my last section. I hope all of this Animated Guardian talk makes sense, and if you have any questions, like always, put them in the description, and subscribe to my channel please, and put a like on this video, it helps me a lot. And like always, have an awesome day everyone.